Have you ever uttered a few words that changed absolutely everything? Tonight, let me regale you with the unforgettable, true-life saga of Sofia Romano, a young waitress. Her simple act of kindness, speaking Italian to assist an elderly customer, snagged the attention of Matteo Duca, the city's most feared mafia boss, and plunged her into a whirlwind of danger, passion, and a love that would redefine her very existence. Sofia, with the grace of a seasoned performer, expertly balanced a hefty tray laden with dinner plates on her forearm. She navigated the bustling Italian restaurant with practiced ease. The cozy ambience, a symphony of clinking glasses and boisterous conversations, filled the air, but Sofia's laser focus remained on delivering the steaming bowls of pasta to table 6 without a single mishap. It was a quintessential Friday night in the city's heart, and Trattoria di Rossi's was positively throbbing with warmth and light. Sofia, petite and nimble, glided through the crowd, her dark hair neatly pinned back, with a stray curl playfully escaping to caress her cheek. Even as her feet throbbed from the grueling shift, she flashed polite smiles at the patrons as she passed. Near the back, nestled in a shadowy corner booth, sat a group of men in impeccably tailored suits. They exuded an air of quiet authority that commanded attention. Other diners stole curious glances in their direction but wisely kept their distance. Sofia had noticed them earlier, particularly the man seated in the center, whose presence radiated an unmistakable command. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, perhaps, boasting broad shoulders and a sharply chiseled jawline, softened by a thoughtful, almost distant expression. He had barely touched his meal, choosing instead to observe the room with piercing hazel eyes that seemed to miss absolutely nothing. Sofia didn't recognize him, but something about his mere presence made her heart skip a beat, a tantalizing mix of intrigue and cautious fear. Mafia, she had instinctively thought when she first laid eyes on the guarded way his companions flanked him. Men like these possessed a certain look, an alert stillness that spoke volumes of concealed power and potential danger. As Sofia carefully delivered the plates to table 6, an elderly woman at table 7 gently touched her hand. "Miss Susie Rata," the grandmotherly patron said, her voice wavering, her English clearly limited. "Sorry, my English not so good." Sofia's face instantly lit up with kindness. She had overheard the couple's earlier attempts to communicate and recognized the familiar cadence of her grandparents' native tongue. Italian. Without hesitation, Sofia responded fluently in Italian, her accent warm and authentic. "Sora, of course." She crouched slightly, bringing herself to the woman's level, and listened intently to her request for a vegetarian option not explicitly listed on the menu. Sofia nodded, reassuring her with comforting words in Italian, and promised to arrange a special dish with the chef. The old woman's eyes crinkled with profound gratitude. In that fleeting moment of tender kindness, Sofia felt a familiar ache tug at her heartstrings. She missed her own Nana dearly, who used to shower her with affection and speak to her in Italian throughout her childhood. Helping the Sonora felt like second nature, a small but significant act of caring in a city that often moved far too quickly for its elders. Sofia excused herself politely and headed toward the kitchen to relay the special order to the chef. From the shadowy corner booth, Matteo Duca had witnessed the entire exchange. The sound of Sofia's fluid Italian words, drifting through the restaurant, instantly snapped his attention, which had been mildly detached until then, into sharp focus on her. The rich, melodious Italian rolling effortlessly off the young waitress's tongue was unexpected, especially here, so far removed from the old neighborhood. He gently set down his untouched glass of red wine. For the first time that evening, Matteo's cold, calculating mind was struck by something deeply personal. He intently watched Sofia as she leaned in compassionately toward the old woman, taking note of the genuine warmth radiating from her espresso-brown eyes. There was something undeniably captivating about her voice. Dio. It had been ages since he'd heard a civilian speak his mother tongue so naturally, without an ulterior motive, calculation, or fear. It stirred a long-dormant memory of his childhood in Sicily. His mother, flour on her hands, singing in the kitchen, A gentle lullaby in Italian when he couldn't sleep, a memory he'd buried deep beneath years of ruthlessly running the family business in this foreign city. One of Matteo's men, Luca, a seasoned veteran, noticed his boss's sudden and intense interest. Luca discreetly followed Matteo's line of sight to the captivating waitress. "Boss?" he asked quietly in Italian. "Tutto bene? Everything all right?" Matteo's gaze remained fixed on Sophia's retreating figure as she disappeared into the bustling kitchen. He narrowed his eyes thoughtfully, his mind already strategizing. She was clearly not part of his world, simply an ordinary girl working a humble job. But the sheer ease with which she spoke Italian set her apart from the crowd. It was the language of his innermost life, rarely heard from strangers in this city. A spark of curiosity, and something akin to protectiveness, ignited within him. He spoke in a low, controlled voice, quiet yet undeniably firm. "Portala dammi," Matteo instructed Luca under the low murmur of the restaurant, the words rumbling like distant thunder. "Bring her to me." Luca blinked, momentarily surprised by the request, but quickly nodded in understanding, smoothly slipping out of the booth without so much as a questioning glance. Sophia emerged from the kitchen moments later, carefully balancing the modified dish in her steady hands. She made her way toward the elderly Italian couple's table to present the chef's special creation, a vibrant plate of roasted vegetables and pasta, glistening with olive oil and fragrant garlic. "Ecco a lei, Sora," Sophia said softly as she set the plate down, smiling at the woman's delighted exclamation and her husband's appreciative nod. The small victory warmed Sophia's heart. It was moments like these that made the long, often grueling hours worthwhile. As she stepped back, Sophia nearly collided with a solid wall of a man who had seemingly materialized right behind her. Startled, she looked up to find Luca, though she didn't know his name, standing imposingly close. He wore a neatly pressed suit, impeccably tailored, and possessed the build of someone who could effortlessly break down a door with a single shoulder. Sophia's pulse jumped erratically. Patrons weren't usually so forward, much less so silent. "Signorina?" the man said with a polite incline of his head, his voice low but courteous. "My boss would like a word with you." He didn't physically touch her, but the way he loomed over her made it abundantly clear that this was not a mere request from a diner craving extra breadsticks. Over his broad shoulder, Sophia glimpsed the shadowy corner booth. The man with the piercing hazel eyes was watching her intently, his expression unreadable. Her throat suddenly went dry. His boss. She instinctively understood precisely who he meant, the quiet, commanding man in the shadows who had effortlessly dominated the room without uttering a single word. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. Had she inadvertently done something wrong? Spilled wine on him by accident? Why would someone like him even want to speak with a nobody waitress like her? She frantically ran through her recent interactions, searching for a plausible explanation. Nothing seemed amiss, except perhaps he had overheard her speaking Italian and taken offense. Or was he some kind of VIP she should know? Around them, the restaurant's lively hum continued unabated, seemingly oblivious to Sophia's sudden wave of anxiety. Despite her rising nerves, she mustered a steady voice. I'm working. Perhaps after I finish with my tables." The large man gave a tight, apologetic smile that failed to reach his eyes, an unsettling gesture. "He insists, Mississippi. It will only take a minute." There was a polite firmness to his tone that clearly conveyed that refusal was not an option. Sophia's mind whirled with mounting apprehension. She glanced imploringly at the old woman's table. The Sonora gave her an encouraging wave, likely assuming that this was someone from management or a friend. Swallowing her rising panic, Sophia nodded reluctantly. "All right, just a minute." Luca smoothly escorted her toward the corner booth. She felt the assessing gaze of the other suited men at the table flick over her, a fleeting evaluation that sent a chilling wave of awareness up her spine. She nervously smoothed her apron with a sweaty palm. As they reached the table, Matteo Duca gracefully rose to his feet, an unexpected and rather striking courtesy. Up close, He was even more captivating than she had initially realized, tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders that filled his tailored suit. He wore a charcoal gray suit that whispered of understated luxury. A faint shadow of a beard traced along his jaw, adding to his rugged appeal, but it was his eyes that truly held her captive. Greenish hazel with subtle flecks of amber, sharp and intensely observant. They flickered over her face, and for a fleeting instant, Sophia felt laid bare, as if he possessed the uncanny ability to read every thought racing through her mind. Mississippi, his deep voice rolled out, polite yet undeniably commanding, resonating with an authority that brooked no argument. Sophia realized she was staring and quickly dropped her gaze, acutely aware of her own discomposure. She couldn't help but notice his hands, strong and capable, with a few faint scars etched across the knuckles, clearly the hands of a man who'd witnessed violence up close. She cleared her throat nervously. "Sophia," she offered quietly. "My name is Sophia Romano." She wasn't entirely sure if he'd even asked for her name or if she should introduce herself, but the oppressive silence pressed on her until she felt compelled to fill it. "Sophia," he repeated, as if savoring the very sound of it. Her name sounded distinctly different in his mouth, subtly touched by a gentle Italian accent that hinted at years spent elsewhere. "Grazie for coming. I apologize if I pulled you away from your work." His tone was courteous, yet it carried the undeniable weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Sophia nervously tucked that stray wisp of hair behind her ear. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" she asked carefully, injecting as much respectful deference into her voice as possible. Her eyes darted to the others seated at the table. They were pointedly not looking at her, as if carefully maintaining an illusion of privacy. She now recognized one face, finally placing him as a local city councilman who occasionally appeared in the news. Her stomach clenched with mounting unease. If that man was associating with this stranger, whatever circle he belonged to was powerful indeed. Matteo didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for his wine glass and gestured toward the seat opposite him in the booth. "Please sit," he said. Sophia hesitated, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Marissa, the head waitress, was currently occupied at the register and hadn't yet noticed Sophia being detained. If she was caught fraternizing with a patron, especially one of these powerful men, she could potentially get in serious trouble, or at the very least find herself in over her head. But Luca remained silently by her side, patiently waiting for her decision. And Matteo's request hung in the air, thick with an air of inevitability. "Just 1 minute," he'd said. "Perhaps it would be all right." Sophia gingerly slid onto the very edge of the seat across from him, her back ramrod straight and her heart thumping wildly in her chest. Luca stepped back a pace, silently standing guard at a discreet distance. Matteo watched her with an intensity in his eyes that made her shiver involuntarily. "I couldn't help but overhear you earlier," he began, his fingers lightly circling the rim of his wine glass. "You speak Italian beautifully." Sophia's cheeks unexpectedly warmed at the unexpected praise. "Oh, thank you," she stammered, her mind racing. He had summoned her over simply because she spoke Italian? She managed a timid smile. "My grandmother is from Calabria," she explained, hoping to diffuse the awkwardness. "I grew up speaking Italian at home." Her voice gained a bit of strength when she spoke of her beloved family. "The couple at table 7 seemed to need help, so I just—" "You did well," Matteo interjected softly, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It was kind of you." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so it wouldn't carry beyond her. "In this city, not many take the time to show such care, especially in 2 languages." There was almost a hint of genuine admiration in his tone, a surprising twist. Sophia was genuinely taken aback. The last thing she had expected from a man like this was a commendation for her compassion. Up close, she noticed a faint scar at his temple, mostly concealed by his short, meticulously styled black hair. A story there, no doubt, she thought, and while his manner was undeniably civil now, she could sense a coiled tension simmering beneath the surface, like a panther momentarily at rest, poised to strike at any given moment. I'm glad I could help them, Sophia replied, finally finding her voice. Was that why you wanted to see me? Mateo's lips curved in the barest hint of a smile, just a fraction of an inch. In part, he said. He glanced down at his wine glass, turning it once, then back at her. It's rare to be reminded of home in the middle of dinner. He paused, then added almost pensively, hearing you speak, it reminded me of someone I knew. Sophia sensed a fleeting flicker of melancholy in his last words. For a heartbeat, his polished mask slipped, revealing a man who had memories that could still profoundly touch him, a vulnerability that he quickly masked. Then the steely resolve was firmly back in his gaze. He straightened almost imperceptibly, regaining his composure. How long have you worked here, Sophia? He asked, his voice once again laced with that subtle command. She answered cautiously. Almost a year. It's a good job. She briefly wondered if he was a friend of the owner, discreetly checking up on the staff. But no, that didn't quite fit. Perhaps he had simply overheard her speaking Italian and wanted to chat. A harmless conversation. The thought was both reassuring and deeply unnerving all at once. She couldn't deny that despite her weariness, there was something magnetically compelling about him, an undeniable charisma that drew her in. Her pulse hadn't steadied since she'd reluctantly sat down. Mateo nodded slowly. You handle yourself well. The customers are lucky to have you. The way he delivered the compliment, it almost sounded personal, not merely a platitude. Sophia felt heat rise to her face yet again and self-consciously looked down at her hands, suddenly feeling exposed under his intense scrutiny. Thank you, senor, she murmured politely. She glanced warily at the other men in the booth, who were still carefully ignoring them, maintaining the carefully constructed illusion of privacy. One man was scrolling mindlessly on his phone, while another meticulously stirred his espresso. Yet, she had absolutely no doubt that they missed absolutely nothing. Was this simply how power worked? A man like him sees something or someone he wants to explore, and the entire world around him bends to accommodate his desires? As if sensing her rising unease, Mateo spoke again, his voice a shade gentler than before. Forgive me. I realize I haven't introduced myself properly. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. My name is Mateo Duca. The name landed in her ears with a dull thud, ringing with a vague yet unsettling familiarity. Perhaps she'd heard it on the local news or in hushed, murmured warnings circulating throughout the neighborhood. Sophia's hand instinctively went cold around the edge of the table. Yes, she had definitely heard that name before, only ever spoken in hushed whispers and fearful tones. The Duca family. The rumors of an Italian crime family that had silently moved into the city years ago, a family whispered to be both silent and deadly, instantly flooded her mind. If he was that Duca, she fought with every ounce of self-control to keep her face neutral, as a prickle of icy fear coated her skin. Mateo studied her reaction keenly, his eyes sharp and assessing. I see you recognize it, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Not quite a question. His tone held a resigned note, as if he was fully accustomed to people recoiling in fear and apprehension once they understood precisely who he was. Sophia's instincts screamed at her to tread carefully, to choose her words with the utmost precision. One simply didn't casually mingle with Mafia bosses and emerge unscathed. I've heard the name, she admitted cautiously, her voice barely audible. Her eyes flickered nervously toward the exit unconsciously, her mind already searching for an escape route. Was she in imminent danger now? But no, he had been nothing but courteous, even almost kind in his own way. If he intended to harm her, he certainly wouldn't be sitting here engaging in polite small talk. Mateo's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, an infinitesimally small reaction to the unspoken tension that now hung heavily in the air. I assure you, I only wish to compliment you and to talk, nothing more, he said, his voice sincere. He sounded almost apologetic, as if he sincerely regretted the long shadow his infamous reputation cast. Sophia swallowed hard, desperately mustering a polite reply. It's all right, Mr. Duca. I appreciate the compliment. She started to cautiously slide out of the booth, feeling instinctively that lingering here any longer might be akin to playing with fire. If there's nothing else, I really should get back to work. My manager will. He held up a hand, not physically touching her, but effectively signaling her to pause. Surprisingly, he reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a sleek black business card. With 2 fingers, he offered it to her. Confused, Sophia hesitantly accepted it. Embossed on the card was a simple name, Matteo Duca, and a local phone number. Nothing more. If you ever find yourself in need of anything, qualcosa, anything at all, Matteo said. His voice quiet but undeniably firm, locking her gaze with his. Call that number. Day or night, I owe you a kindness. She stared blankly at the card. The idea of a powerful mafia boss feeling genuinely indebted to her was surreal, almost laughably absurd. She shook her head lightly in disbelief. I didn't do anything. You did, he interrupted, his eyes pinning her in place, brooking no argument. You reminded me that even in this city, so far from home, there are still good people. People who speak the language of my mother, who still show genuine respect. He inclined his head slightly. And you might have done more than you realize. Small actions can have big consequences. Sophia wasn't entirely sure what he specifically meant by that cryptic statement, but she sensed he was being sincere in his own enigmatic way. Clutching the card tightly in her hand, she offered a faint, courteous smile. That's very kind, Mr. Duca. He nodded once, then, to her utter surprise, actually stood as she rose from the booth. An old-world gesture of gallantry that completely caught her off guard. The other men at the table glanced up in mild astonishment, clearly surprised by the unexpected display. Apparently, it wasn't often that their boss showed such deference and chivalry. With a final look, one that held an intensity that Sophia couldn't quite decipher, Matteo dismissed her. Buonanotte, Sophia. The words, good night, rolled effortlessly off his tongue, intimately, as if he were wishing her sweet dreams. Sophia's chest fluttered with a mix of emotions. Buonanotte, she replied softly, then quickly remembered to add in English, good night, sir. She walked back toward the bustling kitchen on unsteady legs, feeling the weight of Matteo's intense gaze lingering on her back until she finally rounded the corner, out of sight. The entire exchange had lasted only a few minutes, but Sophia felt as if she'd stepped briefly into an entirely different world, one governed by its own unique set of rules and inherent dangers. She slipped the card into her apron pocket and drew a calming breath, attempting to regain her composure. The comforting scent of tomato sauce and fragrant basil emanating from the kitchen helped to ground her. Focus, she told herself firmly. She was just a waitress, simply finishing her shift. Back to reality. Yet, as she resumed her routine tasks, the adrenaline coursing through her veins refused to completely dissipate. Against her better judgment, she found herself surreptitiously peeking at the corner booth from the kitchen doorway. Matteo had settled back down, now deeply engaged in a hushed conversation with the councilman, his expression once again unreadable. One of his men leaned in to murmur something in his ear, and Matteo's eyes flicked up, locking directly with Sophia's across the crowded room. Her breath caught sharply in her throat. Had he sensed her watching him? Even from such a distance, the unexpected connection jolted through her like a live electrical wire. Matteo gave the barest hint of a nod, polite and acknowledging, then promptly returned his attention to his companions, leaving Sophia with a pounding heart and a head full of unanswered questions. She ducked back into the safety of the kitchen, silently berating herself for her foolishness. Get a grip, she mentally scolded. She shouldn't be even remotely fascinated by a man like that. He was undoubtedly trouble, no matter how courteously he spoke or how incredibly handsome he happened to be. The sensible thing to do was to avoid any and all further interactions. People who became entangled with men like Matteo Duca often ended up deeply hurt or worse. Sophia finished the remainder of her shift in a distracted haze, her mind still replaying the strange encounter. By the time the last of the customers had paid their bills and the chairs were flipped onto the tables for mopping, She had almost convinced herself that the bizarre encounter was finally over. Likely, she would never see Matteo Duca again. Perhaps he was simply feeling nostalgic tonight, and come tomorrow, he'd completely forget about the kind waitress who spoke Italian. As she hung up her apron and reached for her coat, Sophia's fingers instinctively brushed against the card, still tucked safely in her pocket. She carefully pulled it out, regarding the elegant script of his name, Matteo Duca. Her thumb gently traced the embossed phone number. It struck her as odd that he hadn't actually explained why she might ever need it. Just anything at all. The generous, yet simultaneously daunting implication hung heavily in the air. With a slight shiver, Sophia tucked the card safely into her purse and headed out the back exit into the cool night air. The air was crisp for early summer, carrying the distant honk of city traffic and a faint whiff of rain on the breeze. It was almost midnight, and her small apartment was only 6 blocks away, a walk she often enjoyed after a long and stuffy shift indoors. She could easily take the bus, but the night was calm, and the streets of this particular neighborhood were usually quiet and peaceful by this late hour. Sophia wrapped her light jacket tightly around herself and started down the narrow alley that led to the main boulevard. The streetlights cast long, dancing shadows between the dumpsters and stacked crates behind the restaurant, creating an eerie atmosphere. She passed the mouth of the alley where it opened onto the sidewalk, giving a friendly nod to the busboy Andres, who was smoking a last cigarette by the curb. He cheerfully waved and offered a buenas noches, and she returned the good night with a smile. As she continued her walk, her thoughts strayed once again to Matteo Duca. His intense eyes, the way he'd stood as she left the booth as if she were a lady and not just a humble server. She shook her head and smiled wryly at her own foolishness. It had been a long time since any man had made her heart flutter, and, trust her luck, it would be someone like him. Lost in her musings, Sophia almost didn't notice the sleek black car parked a little ways down the block, its engine softly idling. But the low rumble and a faint glow emanating from the headlights eventually drew her attention. A sleek black sedan, clearly expensive and impeccably maintained, was stationed at the curb near the restaurant's main entrance, undoubtedly waiting for someone, perhaps a late-night pickup from the bar next door. Suddenly feeling self-conscious, Sophia squared her shoulders and quickened her pace, her heels clicking softly on the pavement. She had an inexplicable sense that she was once again being watched, though the street appeared completely deserted except for the distant silhouette of Andres finishing his cigarette. Just as she was about to cross the intersection to her street, a voice called out softly from behind her, causing her to jump in surprise. "Miss Romano." She turned quickly, her senses on high alert. Luca, the same broad-shouldered man from before, smoothly stepped out of the shadows by the idling car. How long had he been standing there, silently watching her? In his outstretched hand, he held something out toward her. Her heart leaped into her throat, adrenaline flaring anew. In the yellow cone of the streetlight, she instantly recognized her own cell phone. "You left this on the table," Luca said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle and apologetic. At the booth, Sophia exhaled hard, the tension in her chest loosening a notch as she realized he was simply returning her forgotten phone. She hadn't even noticed it was missing, a fact that flushed her cheeks with embarrassment at her own scatterbrained lapse. "Grazie," she said quietly, taking the device from his hand. Their exchange was quick and efficient, but not quite quick enough to miss the subtle way Luca's eyes scanned the dark street around them, ever vigilant and watchful. She offered a polite smile, still mortified by her carelessness. "Thank you. I'm sorry you had to come all this way." "It's no trouble," Luca replied, inclining his head respectfully. "Boss's orders. He didn't want you to worry when you noticed it missing." Sophia bit her lip thoughtfully, touched by the fact that Matteo Duca would send someone after her just to return her phone. He really was thorough and considerate in his own way, she mused. The thought warmed her, even as it raised even more questions in her already overwhelmed mind. "Please thank him for me," she said softly, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "I appreciate it." Luca gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile, brief and professional. "I will. Have a safe night, miss." He hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to say more, then added, "Do you need a ride home?" Sophia blinked, surprised by the unexpected offer. The sleek black sedan idled just behind him, a silent sentinel. A part of her was undeniably tempted. Her feet were throbbing with pain and a ride sounded utterly heavenly. But climbing into a car with the Mafia, even for a seemingly innocent courtesy drop-off, felt like stepping over an invisible line, crossing into a realm from which there might be no easy return. "Oh, that's really not necessary," she replied quickly, tightening her grip on her purse. "I don't live far. I'll be fine. But thank you." Luca gave a single, curt nod, not pressing the matter any further. "As you wish. Be careful." He turned and walked back to the sedan, giving one last, sweeping look around the deserted street before getting into the passenger side. Sophia caught a fleeting glimpse through the tinted window. She thought she saw a shadowy figure in the back seat, someone watching her intently. But then the door closed with a soft click, and the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. In a matter of seconds, it disappeared silently around the corner, leaving her alone once more. Sophia released a breath she didn't even realize she'd been holding, her muscles finally relaxing. She wasn't sure if she felt relieved or oddly bereft. Shaking her head, she chastised herself yet again for her foolishness. This was utter folly. Daydreaming about gentlemen mobsters and stolen glances. Real life awaited. Her small apartment, her responsibilities, her... After fulfilling her waitressing responsibilities, Sophia imagined a warm bath to soothe her aching feet. Clutching her phone securely, she continued her walk, attempting to quell the lingering adrenaline rush with pragmatic thoughts. She resolved to visit Nona the next day, perhaps bringing her some cannoli from the bakery, as her grandmother cherished sweet treats on Saturdays. The anticipation of their visit brought a smile to Sophia's face. By the time Sophia arrived on her quiet block, characterized by old brick buildings and towering sycamore trees, she had largely succeeded in pushing the memory of Matteo's mesmerizing eyes from her thoughts. However, as she ascended the stairs to her second-floor apartment, a small voice within her couldn't help but wonder if fate had taken an unexpected turn that evening, and whether their paths might cross again with the enigmatic Matteo Duca. The following evening, Sophia found herself once more at Trattoria di Rosie for another shift. The Saturday night crowd was boisterous, and despite her fatigue from a morning spent visiting her grandmother and running errands, she maintained her usual warm smile. As the hours passed and the evening wore on, the initial rush subsided. Near closing time, only a few tables remained occupied, mostly by couples lingering over dessert and coffee. Sophia was wiping down the bar counter when the bell above the front door chimed, announcing a new arrival. She looked up, expecting a last-minute customer. To her astonishment, Matteo Duca walked in. He was without his usual entourage tonight, dressed in more casual attire, a well-fitted black shirt and tailored slacks that still hinted at his considerable wealth. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of him. He paused just inside the entrance, instinctively surveying the room. When his gaze met hers, a genuine, albeit subtle, smile touched his lips. He approached the bar where she stood, seemingly rooted to the spot, a mix of nerves and inexplicable delight battling within her. "Good evening, Sophia," Matteo said softly. She swallowed, finally finding her voice. "Good evening, Mr. Duca." She glanced around. The other waitstaff had retreated to the kitchen to begin the closing cleanup, and the manager was in the back office, balancing the receipts. They were practically alone in the front of the house. "You can call me Matteo," he offered, tilting his head slightly. "I hope I'm not intruding. I know it's late." Sophia shook her head quickly. "No, not at all. We're still open." She tried to appear composed, although her pulse had quickened noticeably. "Would you like a table?" "Actually," he said, "I was hoping for an espresso if it's not too much trouble." He settled onto a bar stool, relaxing his posture. "Of course, I can make you one," Sophia replied. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the espresso machine's portafilter. She willed herself to calm down. "It's just coffee," she chided herself, not an interrogation. As she prepared the espresso, Matteo watched her with calm interest. "How is your grandmother?" he asked unexpectedly. Sophia nearly dropped the tamper. She looked up, surprised. "My grandmother? You mentioned she was from Calabria. I presume she might still be with you." Matteo's voice was courteous, but Sophia detected genuine curiosity in his tone. "She is," Sophia answered, touched that he remembered. "I visit her every Saturday morning. Took her groceries today. Actually, she's doing all right for 82. Sophia smiled softly, thinking of Nona's stubborn insistence on cooking despite her arthritis. "She practically raised me, so we're very close." Matteo nodded, an almost wistful glint in his eyes. "That bond is important. Family is a beautiful thing, Sophia." Sophia nodded as she placed a tiny porcelain cup under the spout and started the espresso shot. "What about you? Do you have family here in the city?" It was a bold question, but perhaps a fair one, since he'd inquired about hers. He was silent for a moment, the faint hum of the machine filling the air. "My mother is back in Sicily," he said at last. "I lost my father a long time ago. Here I have cousins, distant relatives, and those who work for me whom I consider family." He gave a small shrug. "But no one like a Nona to fuss over me." There was a hint of melancholy wrapped in gentle humor. Sophia found herself smiling a little as she set the finished espresso in front of him on a saucer. "Then it's a good thing you at least have cousins and such around. And friends," she added. Not sure if a man like him had real friends. Matteo thanked her for the coffee, lifting it to his lips. He took a sip, his eyes closing briefly as if savoring something simple and good in an otherwise complicated life. "Perfetto," he pronounced softly, then met her gaze. "I do have some friends. Yes, though in my world that word can be complicated." Sophia sensed layers beneath that statement but didn't pry. Instead, she leaned lightly against the counter, finding this quiet moment surreal yet pleasant. Who would have thought she'd be chatting casually with a Mafia boss over late-night espresso? A comfortable silence fell as he drank. Sophia absently straightened a stack of napkins to occupy her hands, stealing glances at Matteo's face. He looked more relaxed than the previous night, though his eyes still held that vigilant edge. Despite the danger surrounding him, in this moment, he seemed almost human, just a tired man enjoying a bit of normalcy. Her curiosity bubbled up. "What brings you back here tonight?" "Surely not just the espresso," she ventured softly. Matteo set down his cup, the faintest smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps I wanted to see how you were doing after last night. It isn't every day I have the opportunity to meet someone like you." Sophia felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment and looked down. "Someone like me?" He tapped a finger on the counter thoughtfully. "A person with kindness and backbone. Bilingual, to boot," he said lightly, then more seriously. "This city can be unwelcoming to people who aren't hardened. I hope it's treating you well." Something in his genuine concern loosened Sophia's tongue. "I manage. It's not always easy. Working long hours, taking care of family, but I get by. I love this city, even when it's rough. It's home." Matteo's gaze softened. "You remind me that sometimes we do things not for ourselves, but for those we love. It's admirable." Before Sophia could respond, the quiet was shattered by the abrupt ringing of Matteo's phone. He frowned apologetically and pulled it out, glancing at the screen. As he answered in Italian, his posture stiffened, and his voice dropped into a terse murmur. She couldn't catch much, just a few words: "Adesso, now, problema, problem, and fire. Be careful." Sophia pretended to busy herself wiping an already clean spot on the counter, giving him privacy, but her stomach fluttered with unease. His tone had put her on alert. Matteo hung up and slid off the bar stool, all traces of relaxation gone. His jaw was set, whether in irritation or concern, she couldn't tell. "Sophia," he said quietly, "I'm sorry, I have to go." Disappointment flickered through her, but his urgency was obvious. "Of course, I understand." He pulled out several large bills and set them under the demitasse cup. Far too much for a simple espresso. Sophia opened her mouth to protest the excessive tip, but he stopped her with a raised hand. "Please indulge me." She nodded slowly, watching as he turned to leave, fishing car keys from his pocket. At that moment, two of his men hurriedly entered the restaurant, as if they'd been waiting outside. Matteo barked something in a low voice to them in Italian that Sofia only partially caught. "Stanno arrivando, he's coming. Preparativi, get ready." "They're coming, get ready." Her pulse quickened. "Who's coming?" Matteo glanced back at Sofia, his eyes meeting hers across the now empty dining area. In them she saw both a warning and worry. "Stay here," he commanded, firm, but not shouting. "Don't move." Sofia's heart lurched. "What?" Before she could finish, the front window exploded. A deafening crack of gunfire split the air. Screams from the kitchen rang out as shards of glass shattered onto the empty tables. Sofia ducked instinctively behind the bar, terror flooding her veins. The restaurant plunged into chaos. Another shot rang out, whizzing past where Matteo had stood just seconds before. He had dropped to one knee behind an overturned table, a gun somehow already in his hand. One of his men yanked the confused busboy to the ground, shouting for everyone to get down. It was an ambush. Through the spider-webbed front glass, Sofia saw a dark figure outside with a pistol, taking aim again. Matteo fired back twice with lethal calm, and the figure ducked behind a parked car. The world narrowed to sounds and surges of adrenaline. Sofia pressed herself against the wooden bar, her mind racing. Matteo had told her to stay down, but where was safe? Another bullet ripped through a chair above her, sending splinters raining down. She muffled a cry. From her vantage point, she could see Matteo gesturing sharply to his men. Luca, she recognized him, was already moving along the wall, circling toward the side exit to flank the shooter. The other guard stayed close to Matteo, covering him. Sofia's thoughts screamed, "This isn't happening." 1 minute they were talking softly. The next it was a war zone. Her breaths came shallow and fast. Was this because of him? Of course it was. He must have been the target. She dared to peek out over the bar. Matteo caught her eye and mouthed, "Stay!" Even amid the danger, his gaze held concern for her. Suddenly, from outside, an engine revved. Tires squealed on the pavement. The attacker must have decided to flee. Luca burst through the front door in pursuit, gun in hand, but the black shape of a motorcycle peeled away down the street, a lone rider escaping into the night. For a moment, silence reigned inside the riddled restaurant. The acrid smell of gunpowder hung in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of spilled coffee and dust. Sofia slowly uncurled from her crouch. Her ears rang. It had all happened in seconds, though it felt like hours. Matteo rose from behind the bullet-riddled table, slipping his gun back under his jacket. He scanned the room for threats, then immediately hurried toward the bar. "Sofia." The raw edge in his voice made her heart twist. I'm okay," she managed, though she wasn't entirely sure. He came around to her side, stepping carefully over broken glass and debris. "Are you hurt?" His hands lightly gripped her shoulders, his eyes searching her body for any sign of injury. She shook her head, her voice trembling. "I don't think so. Just..." She winced, feeling a sting in her forearm. A shallow cut from a flying shard of glass was oozing blood. Only then did the pain register through the adrenaline. Matteo followed her glance and gently took her arm, inspecting the wound. A muscle in his jaw ticked at the sight of blood. He pulled a pristine handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it to the cut firmly. "It's not deep," he murmured, his voice strained with a mix of anger and concern. "We'll get it taken care of." In the kitchen doorway, the staff huddled, their eyes wide with shock. Marissa, the head waitress, was dialing the police with shaking fingers. Andres peeked out, his face pale. Once they saw the shooting had stopped, a few ventured into the dining area to survey the damage. One look at Matteo and his guard, and Marissa's expression shifted from panic to fury. "You!" she spat, pointing at Matteo with the nerve of someone who didn't realize the danger. "You brought this violence here." Matteo's guard stepped forward with a scowl, but Mateo lifted a hand to hold him back. A shadow of regret crossed Mateo's face as he faced Marissa. "Me despias," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Please tend to your people. We will cover the damages." Marissa looked ready to unleash more, but the sight of his gun at his hip silenced her. She instead turned to comfort a trembling server. Luca jogged back inside, his chest heaving from the aborted chase. "He got away, boss," he said bitterly. "But it was Ricardo's man for sure. I recognized him." Mateo's eyes flashed with lethal intent. "Of course," he muttered. "The coward sends lackeys." Sirens wailed in the distance now, the police responding to reports of gunfire. Mateo's expression hardened further. He shifted his attention back to Sophia, who stood clutching the bloodied handkerchief to her arm, trying to steady her breathing. His voice dropped to a gentle whisper at odds with the storm in his eyes. "Sophia, the police will be here soon, but I need to get you out of here subito right away." She stared at him, still processing everything. The police? Normally, she'd welcome them after something like this, but Mateo was a wanted man, or at least someone they'd be very interested in. If she stayed, she'd be pulled into hours of questioning, and possibly danger if she mentioned his name. And there was the attacker still out there. Her head spun. I should give a statement. There's no time," he urged, an unusual plea in his tone. "Trust me, staying will only put you in more danger. Ricardo might have more men nearby." He gently guided her toward the side door, away from the front, where curious neighbors were beginning to gather outside. Sophia's feet moved on autopilot as she tried to process who Ricardo was, likely his enemy. Behind them, Luca and the other guard moved to cover their exit. They seemed to have done this drill before, clearing a path. Sophia balked for a second, looking back at her co-workers. "I can't just leave. They'll be all right. We'll make sure the restaurant is compensated." Mateo's hand was firm at the small of her back, propelling her into the alley just as the first police car's lights strobed red and blue at the end of the block. "Please, Sophia, I need you safe." The night air hit her like a slap, bringing clarity. If she stayed, the police. If she left with Mateo, possibly more gunmen. Who was to say she'd be safer either way? Yet, as she looked up into his face, those fierce eyes now softened with genuine worry for her. A strange calm settled over her panic. He had protected her. She had seen him deliberately draw fire away from where she hid. This dangerous man was now her best chance at safety. "Okay," she breathed, and that was all he needed. In one swift motion, Mateo shrugged off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, concealing her waitress uniform and the bloodstains. He guided her briskly down the alley, where only minutes ago she'd walked home peacefully. Now it was a harrowing path toward an uncertain fate. They reached an SUV tucked behind the building. Another of Mateo's men leapt out from the driver's seat as they approached, holding the door open. Mateo helped Sophia into the back seat, climbing in beside her while Luca took the front. The door barely shut when the vehicle roared to life and sped away just as two police officers cautiously entered the alley from the other end, guns drawn. Sophia caught a glimpse of flashlights sweeping the shadows where they'd stood seconds before. Her stomach clenched at how close that was. The SUV merged into city traffic, obeying speed limits now to avoid drawing attention but efficiently putting distance between them and the scene. Sophia sat back, the leather seats cold against her legs. Her whole body began to shake as the adrenaline faded, leaving shock in its wake. Mateo noticed immediately. Without a word, he reached over and gently took her hand, the one not pressed to her wound. His warmth seeped into her trembling fingers. She didn't pull away. She couldn't. In that moment, it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. "You're safe now," he said softly, as if speaking to a spooked animal. "I promise." Sophia nodded mutely. Safe? With a Mafia boss on the run from the police and his enemies. The absurdity almost made her laugh hysterically, but she held it together, focusing on his hand around hers, the quiet strength it conveyed. After a few blocks, Mateo spoke again, this time to Luca in the front. "Any tale?" Luca glanced at the side mirror, then shook his head. Nothing. I think we lost them in the confusion, and I doubt the cops got a good look at the plate. Matteo grunted in acknowledgement. He then turned his attention fully to Sophia. In the dim glow from the dash, his face was taut with concern. We're going to my home. It's secure. I'll have a doctor meet us there to look at your arm and, to be safe, check you for shock. Sophia found her voice at last, croaking. Your home? But my family will wonder where I am. She trailed off, realizing with a pang that, indeed, her mother and grandmother would panic if she didn't come home at all tonight. She kept her phone in her apron. No, she had it. Luca had returned it the previous night. It was in her purse. As if reading her thoughts, Matteo reached inside the jacket he'd cloaked around her and found the outline of her phone in the pocket. He handed it to her. You can call them on the way. Tell them you're safe, he said gently. Maybe say you're with a friend. His lips quirked at the last word, aware of how insufficient it was to describe this situation. But Sophia appreciated the gesture. He was giving her a way to reassure her family without revealing too much. She unlocked the phone with unsteady fingers. It was past midnight now. Her mother would be asleep, but her grandmother had a habit of waking in the middle of the night and checking on Sophia if she wasn't home yet. She made a quick decision to call her mother's cell, which would be on silent at this hour, allowing her to leave a voicemail. Picked up after 2 rings, going to message. Her voice trembling, but trying to sound calm. Sophia said, Mama, it's me. Something happened at work. There was an incident, but I'm okay. I'm with a friend for the night because the police need statements and stuff. I'll come home tomorrow morning. Don't worry, please. I'm safe. I love you. She hung up, hoping that would suffice until she could explain in person. Guilt gnawed at her. She hated lying, or at least hiding the full truth. But how could she possibly explain this? The SUV turned down a private drive, passing through a tall wrought iron gate that opened at Luca's remote signal. Sophia peered out at the sudden change of scenery. The city lights gave way to a long driveway lined with manicured hedges and trees. At the end loomed an elegant 3-story mansion, its facade lit by strategic lights that glowed warmly against stone walls. It was beautiful and imposing, an oasis of wealth and privacy. Tucked discreetly in a wealthy enclave she never realized existed so close to downtown. The tires crunched on gravel as they pulled up to the house. 2 more men appeared at the entrance as the vehicle came to a stop. Guards, obviously armed, who relaxed once they recognized the car. Matteo stepped out first, then reached to help Sophia. Her legs were unsteady, both from shock and from entering this grand estate as if in a fever dream. She must have looked pale, because Matteo swept an arm around her waist to support her. She stiffened slightly at the intimate gesture, but it did make her feel steadier. Inside, the mansion was even more impressive. They entered a spacious foyer with marble floors and a sweeping staircase. A chandelier cast a soft glow over polished wood and tasteful artwork. It was the kind of home one only saw in magazines. Yet it was eerily quiet, like a gallery after hours. No sooner had they entered than a man in a white dress shirt hurried towards them, carrying a medical bag, a doctor, or at least someone who looked the part. Dottore, Matteo addressed him. Grazie for coming so quickly. The graying man nodded, concern etched on his face as he looked between Matteo and Sophia. Always, Matteo. I came as soon as I heard. Who is injured? Signorina Romano has a cut on her arm. Possibly some shock. See to her first, Matteo said. Sophia opened her mouth to protest. Matteo had a streak of blood on his temple and a small tear in his sleeve. She wasn't the only one who needed attention. I'm fine. It's just a scratch, she insisted, her voice still shaky. He should look at you. But Matteo gently guided her to sit on a velvet-upholstered bench in the foyer. I'm all right, just a graze. Only when she was seated did he remove his arm from around her. He bent closer, meeting her eyes. Let the doctor check you, per favor. Please. His gentle plea made her relent. The doctor introduced himself as Dr. Moretti with a reassuring smile and crouched beside her to tend to her arm. As he carefully peeled away the makeshift handkerchief bandage, Sophia hissed slightly at the sting. Matteo barked low instructions to Luca and the other men. Words like security, patrol the grounds, and find that bastardo Riccardo carried to her ears. Dr. Moretti cleaned the wound with antiseptic from his kit. Sophia winced, but her eyes followed Matteo as he strode a few paces off, phone to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian, too low for her to catch. He was a whirlwind of control and anger barely leashed. Even as the doctor applied a small bandage to her arm, she barely felt it, too focused on the man who had swept her into his storm. Soon the doctor was done with her. Just a shallow cut, he said kindly. No stitches needed. How do you feel otherwise, dear? Any dizziness? Nausea? I'm all right. Sophia lied unconvincingly. Her hand still trembled in her lap. Dr. Moretti patted her hand. Shock is normal after such an ordeal. I'll make you some chamomile tea to help calm your nerves. How about that? She nodded appreciatively. Thank you, doctor. He gave her a fatherly nod and rose. As he passed Matteo, he clapped the younger man on the shoulder and murmured, Sit down before you fall down, Figlio. Son, let me see that graze. Matteo ended his call and reluctantly allowed the doctor to examine him. It seemed the bullet had grazed the side of his head just enough to bleed, but it wasn't serious. Sophia realized with a start that if she hadn't seen the attacker, or if Matteo had moved a second slower, her stomach lurched at the thought that he could have been killed. She found herself rising and stepping closer as the doctor cleaned the wound on Matteo's temple. Matteo sat on the bench now, and his eyes flicked to her hovering form. All okay? He asked softly, even as the antiseptic made him flinch slightly. Sophia nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. Just worried about you. The admission slipped out before she could reconsider. It felt natural after what they'd just survived together. The doctor raised an eyebrow and gave a faint knowing smile as he placed a small bandage on Matteo's head. There you'll live, Don Duca, hard-headed as you are. With that gentle ribbing, Dr. Moretti excused himself to prepare that tea, leaving them momentarily alone under the soft chandelier light. They regarded each other in charged silence. The events of the night loomed between them, terrifying and bonding. They regarded each other in an unspoken way. Finally, Matteo stood, rotating his shoulder as if checking for lingering aches, and turned to face her squarely. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his words carrying a heavy weight. This is my fault. Sophia started to object, but he cut her off, his voice thick with remorse. I never should have come back to see you tonight. I put you in danger. If anything had happened to you. He broke off, exhaling sharply, his composure momentarily fracturing. I was a selfish fool. Sophia was deeply moved by the raw emotion in his voice. She hesitated for a moment, then reached out to gently touch his forearm. Matteo, you couldn't have known about that man. He would have attacked you wherever you were, right? It's not because of me. Matteo's hand moved to cover hers, a gesture of gratitude for her absolution, but his eyes remained troubled. Perhaps Riccardo has been after me for months, and now I'm bringing violence into your workplace, into your life. He shook his head. It's unforgivable. Sophia's own temper flared at his self-reproach. Unforgivable would have been leaving me there to potentially get shot or caught in the crossfire. But you didn't. You protected me. Her voice trembled slightly as she recalled how he had drawn gunfire away from the bar where she had been hiding. You saved all of us, I think, because you were prepared. He offered a humorless half-smile. Prepared to make a bloody mess of a family restaurant. I doubt your coworkers see it that way. Sophia looked down. Marissa's accusation still echoed in her mind. It had been chaotic, but it was true that Matteo's presence had brought danger. And now here she was, pulled from her ordinary life and thrust into his. She gently withdrew her hand and stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. His jacket still hung over her shoulders, enveloping her in his scent. A combination of clean soap, a hint of cologne, and the faint smell of gunpowder residue. The adrenaline was fading, and with it came a rush of conflicting emotions. Relief, fear, gratitude, and an undeniable undercurrent of something more intimate. I don't know what happens now, she admitted softly. Am I supposed to stay here? Will it be safe to go home tomorrow? Mateo's expression shifted to one of resolve. For tonight, you'll stay here. There are plenty of guest rooms. My men are guarding the perimeter. No one will harm you under my roof. He paused, carefully considering his next words. As for tomorrow, we'll assess the situation. Ricardo knows someone was with me when his thug attacked. He might target you whether or not he even knows your name just to hurt me. Sophia's blood turned to ice. She hadn't even considered that. But why would he? I'm nobody to him. To you, she added hastily. Mateo's eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. You are not nobody, Sophia. Not to me. The quiet conviction in his voice stole her breath. He'll use any perceived weakness of mine, and you, unfortunately, have become a target by association. Her knees felt weak again, and she sank onto the bench. This was all too much to process in one night. She rubbed her temples. This is crazy, she murmured. I'm just a waitress. I can't be involved in a mafia war. My family, if anything happened to them. Her voice broke. Mateo knelt down in front of her, taking both of her hands in his. The gesture was startlingly intimate and sincere. Nothing will happen to them, he swore, his voice as firm as iron. I will assign guards discreetly to watch your home, your family. Ricardo wouldn't dare go near them. There was an edge in his voice as he spoke the name, a promise of retribution that made Sophia's skin crawl. She searched his eyes. Why? Why would you do all this for me? He looked almost hurt that she had to ask. Because you saved my life tonight as much as I saved yours. If you hadn't shouted when you did, that first bullet might have found its mark. He touched the bandage on his temple. I owe you a debt of life, Kara. In my world, that is not repaid lightly. Kara, the word meant dear. Sophia's heart skipped a beat hearing it from his lips. And he continued, his voice softer. Because I find that the thought of anything happening to you is unacceptable to me. There was a vulnerability in his confession that made her chest tighten. Before Sophia could respond, Dr. Moretti returned, carrying a tray with a porcelain teapot and cup. He cleared his throat gently at the sight of the mafia boss kneeling at the feet of this young woman. Their hands clasped. I brought the tea, he announced quietly. They separated, Sophia flushing and Mateo rising smoothly to his feet. All business once again. The doctor poured a cup and handed it to Sophia. The fragrant scent of chamomile and lemon balm wafted up, soothing her. Thank you, she said, her voice steadier as she accepted the cup. She realized just how thirsty and drained she was. Blowing gently, she sipped the hot tea, letting its warmth spread through her. I'll leave a mild sedative with the staff should you need help sleeping, Dr. Moretti said as he gathered his bag. Mateo, you know the drill, no strenuous activity or alcohol tonight. That graze will heal fine. Keep the bandage dry. Mateo nodded gratefully. Thank you, Doctor. Send my regards to your wife for dragging you out of bed for me. The older man chuckled. She's long used to it. Take care. He gave Sophia a kind smile. Rest, dear. You'll feel better in the morning. With that, the doctor left, and one of the estate staff escorted him out. Mateo turned back to Sophia. She had finished half the tea, and some color had returned to her cheeks. The fact that he had estate staff, likely a housekeeper or butler, barely registered before. I imagine you'd like to clean up, Mateo said gently. He gestured to her clothes, which were smudged with dust and speckled with blood from her cut. A bruise was forming on her elbow where she'd hit the floor. I can have someone bring you fresh clothes, and I'll show you to a room where you can rest. Sophia realized the night's grime and chaos clung to her like a second skin. A hot shower sounded heavenly, and sleep, if it would come, maybe even better. But a sudden wave of apprehension hit her at the thought of being alone in a strange room in this mansion. The adrenaline crash left her feeling vulnerable. Could you stay? At least until I fall asleep, she blurted out before she could second-guess herself. Immediately, she was mortified by how needy that sounded. I mean, But Mateo didn't bat an eye. "If that's what you want, I'll stay nearby." He reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then stopped, not wanting to presume. "I'll be right down the hall. You have my word nothing will happen here. This home is a fortress, but I understand after what happened. Being alone is hard." She gave a shaky nod, appreciating his understanding. "Thank you." He offered his arm in a surprisingly old-fashioned manner to help her up. She took it, and together they ascended the grand staircase. Sophia gazed around distractedly at the art on the walls, old oil paintings of Italian countryside scenes, and the plush feel of the carpet under her worn work flats. He led her to a spacious guest room on the second floor. It was elegantly furnished in calming tones of cream and gold, with a large four-poster bed and an adjoining bathroom. It smelled faintly of lavender. On the bed, as if by magic, lay neatly folded clothes. A pair of drawstring sleep pants and a soft cotton t-shirt, likely belonging to a woman on staff, or perhaps kept for guests. Sophia looked to Mateo questioningly. He gave a small smile. "I had someone bring a few things for you. They should fit well enough for tonight." She clutched the lapels of his jacket around her, feeling oddly shy now that they were away from the chaos. "Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." He shook his head, stepping back toward the door to give her space. "You owe me nothing, Sophia. It's I who am making amends to you." His gaze lingered as if reluctant to leave her, even for a moment. "Try to rest. We'll talk more in the morning when things are clearer." She nodded. "Good night, Mateo." His name on her lips seemed to soften something in his expression. *Buonanotte, Sophia. He replied gently. He left, leaving the door slightly ajar as he departed, perhaps to reassure her that he was close. Sophia set the tea down on the bedside table and released a long, quivering breath. What a difference a day makes! 24 hours ago, she was a stranger to this man, quietly serving pasta. Now she was in his home, wearing his jacket, her life inexplicably tangled with his. Sophia carefully peeled off the stained work uniform and stepped into the attached bathroom. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, wide-eyed and exhausted, with a small cut on her forehead she hadn't even noticed before. She looked like someone else, someone frightened and uncertain. She tore her gaze away and turned on the shower. Hot water pounded on her skin, washing away the dirt and the lingering smell of smoke. She stood under the spray longer than necessary, letting silent tears mix with the water as the shock and stress finally found release. Sophia cried for a few minutes, mourning the simple life that had been upended and releasing the sheer terror she'd held at bay. When her tears subsided, she finished washing and stepped out, drying off with a plush towel. She slipped on the clean t-shirt and pants, which were a bit large but soft and comforting. As she combed out her damp hair, she took a deep breath. She could do this. Just get through tonight. Tomorrow, maybe this dangerous whirlwind would spit her back out to normalcy. Climbing into the large bed, she realized just how bone-deep weary she was. The mattress was like a cloud. Still, sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, the crack of gunfire replayed in her head. She could almost smell the gunpowder again. See Mateo's figure diving to protect others, the flash of muzzle fire. In the dim lamplight she'd left on, her gaze fell on the door, slightly ajar. True to his word, she sensed a presence outside. Mateo had stationed himself or a guard there. She decided she might feel safer if it really was him. Gathering her resolve, Sophia slipped out of bed and padded to the door. She opened it fully to find Mateo sitting on a chair in the hallway just a few steps away, a book in his hand. He looked up, surprised. "Is everything all right?" he asked, immediately alert. Sophia flushed, suddenly feeling foolish. I just wanted to make sure it was you out here and not, I don't know, a stranger." Mateo set the book aside and stood. "It's just me. I wanted to give you privacy, but remain close if you needed anything." She bit her lip. The strong, fierce protector looked a bit out of place, lingering in a hallway past midnight. "You don't have to stay up keeping watch like this. You should rest too." He gave a slight shrug. I've gone without sleep on many nights. I'm all right. Sophia hesitated, then asked quietly, will you sit with me just for a little while? I think I'd sleep better. Mateo's eyes widened a fraction, but he nodded without hesitation. If that's what you want. She stepped back to let him into the room. He glanced around respectfully, then followed her to the sitting area by the window, where two armchairs faced each other. For a few moments, they sat in silence, the only sound the soft ticking of a clock on the mantel. Sophia looked at Mateo, truly looked, taking in the events that had brought them here. The bandage on his temple, a faint bruise on his cheekbone that she hadn't noticed earlier, likely from diving to the ground. His shirt, now untucked and a bit wrinkled, carried a few specks of blood, her blood, from where he'd held her arm. He looked human and a bit weary, yet still so formidable. She realized she was staring when he met her gaze and offered a gentle, lopsided smile. Feeling better? She nodded. Much thank you. I'm sorry I keep pulling you away from what you need to do. You probably have 100 fires to put out after that attack, and here I am asking you to babysit me. He frowned slightly and leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Sophia, there is nowhere I'd rather be at this moment than here, making sure you're all right. The other matters can wait or be handled by my men. His words wrapped around her heart, squeezing it gently. You mean that, don't you? She murmured almost to herself. Every word, he replied, his voice low. Sophia's cheeks warmed again. She suddenly felt an urge to lighten the heavy atmosphere. She eyed the book he'd left on the chair in the hall. What were you reading? Mateo followed her glance. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost shy. Oh, just a novel. I didn't think I'd actually be reading, but sometimes it helps pass the time. She was intrigued. A novel? Which one? He cleared his throat, and if she wasn't mistaken, a hint of color touched his cheeks. Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. He gave a half-smile. Seemed appropriate, I suppose. Sophia raised her brows in surprise. It wasn't the answer she expected. She found herself smiling. Light bedtime reading, huh? He chuckled, a deep, soft sound that eased some of the residual tension inside her. Perhaps not, but it keeps my mind sharp. There was something endearing about a mafia boss reading classic literature in the middle of the night. It reminded her that there were depths to this man she'd only glimpsed. A cultured side, an introspective side. Do you often have time to read? She asked softly, genuinely curious. Mateo shrugged one shoulder. Not as much as I'd like, but my mother, she was a professor of literature. She instilled in me a love for books when I was young. It's one of the few parts of that old life I've held on to. Sophia was charmed by this revelation. Your mother must be proud that you still read. Then a shadow flickered across his face. I'm not sure proud is a word I'd associate with how my mother might feel about my life. He looked away. We don't speak often. She knows some of what I do, and while she loves me, it causes her pain. Sophia instantly regretted the turn the topic had taken. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He shook his head. Not your fault, just the way things are. She realized in that moment that beneath the confident, commanding facade, Mateo carried burdens that ran deep. It made her ache for him in a way that was both strange and profound, given how briefly she'd known him. Impulsively, she reached across the small distance and placed her hand over his where it rested on the arm of his chair. For what it's worth, I think there's more to you than what causes her pain. He looked down at her hand, then back up, his hazel eyes searching hers. You barely know me, he said, but there was no dismissal in his tone, only a quiet longing for that to be true. Then show me, she whispered, unsure where the bravery came from. Let me see who you are, Mateo. The air between them grew charged, suspended in a moment. It seemed he might close that small distance, perhaps take her in his arms. Sophia's heart hammered at the thought. Part of her was still raw and afraid from the night's events, but another part felt undeniably drawn to this complex man who had walked into her life so unexpectedly. But Mateo, ever the gentleman, simply turned his hand under hers and gave it a gentle squeeze. "In time," he said softly. "You need rest now. We both do." He was right, though a tiny part of her felt disappointment. His warm grasp was comforting. She realized her eyes were growing heavy now that the tea and exhaustion were catching up. "I think I can sleep now," she murmured. Matteo released her hand and stood. "I'll be right outside if you need anything." Sophia mustered a faint smile. "Thank you for staying with me." He inclined his head, then moved to the door. Buonanotte, Sophia. He said again softly. Buonanotte, Matteo. She replied. He left, pulling the door to, but not shutting it fully. Sophia slipped back into the luxurious bed, the sheets cool against her skin. This time, when she closed her eyes, the fear didn't immediately claw at her. She let the memory of Matteo's gentle voice and strong hands drive away the darker images. In a matter of minutes, she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, knowing he stood guard in the shadows. Later that morning, Luca appeared at the doorway, phone in hand and urgency on his face. Bossa, he said. "We caught one of Riccardo's men lurking near the property." Matteo's demeanor hardened instantly. He stood from the chair he'd been dozing in outside Sophia's room. "Keep him in the cellar. I'll be right there." He glanced at Sophia, apology in his eyes. She had woken to the commotion and now stepped out into the hall, pulling a robe around the borrowed sleep clothes. "I need to handle this," he told her gently. "Wait here, Cara." But Sophia's anxiety spiked. Riccardo's man here, that meant danger was still very real. "Be careful," she pleaded. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and followed Luca down the corridor. Minutes ticked by. Unable to sit idle, Sophia crept toward the cellar stairs. Halfway down, she heard raised voices and a muffled cry of pain. Her heart lurched. Peering around the corner, she glimpsed Matteo gripping a bruised, bloodied thug by the collar. "Who else is out there?" Matteo growled. The man spat blood, refusing to answer. Matteo slammed him against the wall, anger rolling off him in palpable waves. Sophia gasped softly. She had never seen him so terrifying. Luca noticed her shadow on the stairs and quickly stepped over. "Miss, you shouldn't be here," he whispered, guiding her back up gently before Matteo could spot her. Shaken, Sophia retreated to the hall. A few minutes later, Matteo emerged, rolling down his sleeves, knuckles raw, his eyes widened, seeing her pale face. "Sophia." She stepped back unconsciously. What did you do to him?" Matteo exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I got the information we needed. Riccardo is planning another attack soon. I have to stop him first." His voice was steely, but Sophia only saw the violence etched on his knuckles. A chill rippled through her. "I don't recognize you like this," she said quietly. "All this talk of killing and revenge. It scares me, Matteo." He reached for her. "Everything I do is to protect us, to end this threat." Tears brimmed in her eyes. "By becoming just as ruthless? I can't, Matteo. I can't watch you turn into someone unrecognizable." She took a shaky breath. "I need to go home. I need to see my family. I can't stay here right now." Anguish flashed over his face. "Please, Sophia. It isn't safe yet. My mother and Nana must be worried sick. I have to see them," she insisted, her voice breaking. "I'll take the risk. I can't be locked away here while all this happens." Matteo looked torn, the fierce protector in him warring with his respect for her wishes. At length, he nodded grimly. "All right, I'll have Luca drive you home, but I'm sending extra men to watch the neighborhood." Sophia wanted to protest further protection, but stopped herself. She managed a small nod. "Thank you." He gently cupped her face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never wanted to frighten you." Her heart ached at his pained expression. "I just need a little time, Matteo, to feel normal with my family." He pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. "I understand. Call me if you need anything. I'll come in a heartbeat." With that, arrangements were made. Within the hour, Luca was driving Sophia back to her neighborhood in a discreet sedan. 2 other cars with Mateo's men followed at a distance. As they pulled up to her modest apartment building, dusk was settling. Sophia's chest tightened with emotion, seeing the lights on in the windows. Her mother was likely cooking dinner, unaware of the turmoil her daughter had been through. "I'll wait outside, miss," Luca said gently as he parked. "Take your time." She thanked him and hurried up the front steps. Using the spare key hidden in a potted plant, she let herself in. Sophia, her mother, Maria, gasped in relief from the kitchen doorway. In seconds, Maria and Nana were embracing her tightly. "We were so worried. You said not to worry, but you were gone all night." "I'm sorry, Mama," Sophia murmured into her shoulder, tears of guilt and happiness mingling. "There was an incident at work, but I'm all right, truly." Nana Carla held her face between work-worn hands, searching her eyes. Karamia, you look exhausted. And what is this bruise?" She thumbed Sophia's cheek where a faint mark remained from the prior chaos. Sophia mustered a reassuring smile. "It's nothing. I missed you both so much." She spent the next hour in the warmth of their little home, deflecting detailed questions with half-truths. Yes, she had been safe with a friend from work after a scary incident. No, she wasn't hurt badly. She just needed to be home tonight. All the while, outside on the street, Sophia occasionally glimpsed a shadow of Luca or another guard keeping watch. It should have comforted her, but instead she felt a nagging unease. If Ricardo was desperate, would even guards deter him? Late that night, after her mother and grandmother had gone to bed, Sophia remained in the darkened living room, restless. She peered through a crack in the curtains. One of Mateo's men stood under a street lamp across the way, ever vigilant. With a sigh, she eased onto the couch. The silence of her home was both a balm and a source of anxiety. She yearned for Mateo, wondering if he was safe, but also dreaded what might come next in this deadly game with Ricardo. Her eyelids grew heavy past midnight. Just as she began to drift into a light sleep, a sudden thud jolted her awake. She sat up, heart pounding. The sound had come from the back door, like something or someone bumping it. Sophia's blood ran cold. She hurried down the hall and quietly knocked on her grandmother's bedroom door, where her mother and Nana slept. Maria cracked it open, eyes blurry. Sophia pressed a finger to her lips, whispering, "Stay with Nana and lock the door now." Fear flared in her mother's eyes at Sophia's tone, but Maria nodded, pulling her sleepy mother further inside and clicking the lock. Another noise, footsteps on the porch. Sophia's mind raced. Luca was supposed to be outside. Where was he? Sophia, heart pounding in her chest, frantically scanned the dim space. She grabbed the first thing she could reach, a hefty ceramic vase sitting innocently on a nearby side table. Clutching it like a lifeline, she stealthily positioned herself behind the living room door, every nerve on high alert. The house was shrouded in shadows, only a weak, ethereal glow from a distant street lamp filtering through the window panes, casting eerie shapes on the walls. Suddenly, a violent, ear-splitting crash of splintering which shattered the silence. 2 menacing, dark figures ruthlessly kicked in the kitchen door, tearing it off its hinges and splintering the frame into jagged shards. Sophia bit back a scream that threatened to erupt from her throat, her knuckles turning bone-white as she gripped the vase with a desperate, almost painful intensity. The intruders' voices, low and menacing, hissed in rapid Italian. "Sbrigati, quick!" They moved with terrifying speed through the devastated kitchen and into the short hallway. As one of the figures passed the living room entrance, Sophia, summoning every last ounce of courage she possessed, swung the heavy vase with all her might, aiming for his head. Connected with a sickening, bone-jarring thud, the man crumpled to the floor in a heap, either unconscious or something far worse. Before she could even register what had happened, a second assailant lunged at her from behind, seizing her arm in a vice-like grip. The vase slipped from her numb fingers and smashed onto the hard ground, shattering into countless pieces. Sophia fought back with the ferocity of a cornered wildcat, kicking, clawing, and writhing in a desperate attempt to break free. "Luca!" she screamed, her voice hoarse with terror, desperately hoping that the guard was somewhere nearby and would hear her cries for help. The thug, unfazed, clamped a calloused hand firmly over her mouth, effectively silencing her, and began dragging her toward the open doorway. Outside, the ominous silhouette of a van loomed in the driveway, a silent predator waiting to swallow her whole. A wave of panic washed over her, fueling her with a surge of adrenaline-induced strength. She sank her teeth into the man's palm with savage force. He yelped in pain and momentarily loosened his grip. Suddenly, the cold, metallic barrel of a gun pressed against her temple, sending a jolt of fear through her entire body. "Basta!" a chillingly cold voice warned, sending shivers down her spine. "One more sound and I'll shoot." Sophia froze, her chest heaving as she sucked in frantic, shallow breaths. In the dimly lit street, she caught a glimpse of Luca's figure lying motionless near the curb, perhaps struck from behind by a lookout. Oh God! With ruthless efficiency, the thug shoved Sophia into the back of the van, binding her wrists tightly with plastic zip ties and slapping a wide strip of duct tape over her mouth, effectively sealing her fate. Her screams died into muffled, desperate whimpers. The van door slid shut with a resounding clang, plunging her into complete darkness. As the engine roared to life, tears streamed silently down her face, a testament to her fear and despair. She realized with a growing sense of dread whose hands she had fallen into. Ricardo had her, and Matteo, he would come. She prayed with every fiber of her being that he would come. After what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only about 20 minutes, the van ground to a jarring halt. Sophia had been tossed around relentlessly on the cold, hard metal floor with each turn, the rough ride bruising her knees and shoulders. Now, as the side door slid open with a screech, she squinted against the harsh glare of floodlights that momentarily blinded her. A strong, calloused hand grabbed her bound arms and yanked her unceremoniously out of the vehicle. The night air was cool and carried a distinct smell of salt and oil, a telltale sign that they must be somewhere near the docks or in an industrial area. In front of her loomed a dilapidated, run-down warehouse, its walls scarred and weathered by time. The thug half-dragged, half-carried her roughly inside the cavernous building. Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her eyes darted frantically around the vast, empty interior, desperately seeking any sign of help or escape, but she saw only shadows and the harsh, unforgiving light cast by a single dangling work lamp. The sound of footsteps echoed ominously through the empty space. From the depths of the shadows, a tall, lean figure emerged, applauding slowly, his movements deliberate and menacing. Ricardo. He wore a long, dark coat that seemed to amplify his sinister presence, and his face split into a wide, triumphant grin as he approached, his eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. "Bravo," he drawled to his underling, casually waving a pistol in his hand. Matteo's little sweetheart delivered as promised. The henchman holding Sophia shoved her forward with brutal force. She stumbled, nearly falling to her knees, but managed to catch herself just in time. Ricardo reached out and snatched the duct tape from her mouth with a cruel, swift yank, sending a searing pain through her lips. She gasped, drawing in a ragged breath of dusty air. He tilted her chin up with the cold, hard barrel of the gun. "Buona sera, signorina," he purred, his voice dripping with false charm. "We finally meet. You've caused me quite some trouble, you know." Sophia glared at him, despite the tears that pricked at her eyes. "Let me go," she demanded, her voice hoarse and trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. Ricardo chuckled, a low, mocking sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "Afraid not. You're the bait, my dear. Matteo will come for you, and when he does, bang." He pressed the gun even harder against her temple, making her flinch involuntarily. She mustered what little courage she had left, her voice trembling but firm with rage. "He'll kill you," she spat, her eyes blazing with hatred. "You won't get away with this." "Oh, feisty," Ricardo sneered, his gaze sweeping over her appraisingly. "Perhaps I see what Mateo likes about you." He eyed her up and down with a predatory look, making her skin crawl with disgust. "Once I finish him, maybe I'll keep you for myself. Pretty trophy." Sophia's stomach churned with revulsion, summoning all her remaining defiance. She abruptly leaned forward and spat at him, the glob of saliva striking him squarely on the cheek. Ricardo's eyes widened in disbelief, his face frozen in shock for a fleeting moment. Slowly, his expression twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He wiped his cheek with a grimace of disgust. "Bruta putana," he snarled, his voice laced with venom. The back of his hand whipped across her face with vicious force, the blow landing with sickening impact. Pain exploded in her cheek, and she crashed to the concrete floor, her ears ringing from the force of the blow. Before she could even gather herself, the thug yanked her roughly to her feet and flung her onto a rickety, old wooden chair. "Tie her," Ricardo ordered coldly, his voice devoid of any emotion. Rough, calloused hands lashed more zip ties around her wrists and ankles, binding her painfully to the chair. Sophia's cheek throbbed with agonizing pain. She tasted blood in her mouth, a metallic tang that added to her misery, but she refused to let Ricardo see her cry. He crouched down in front of her, grabbing a fistful of her hair and forcing her head back, his grip tightening until she felt her scalp burning. "When Mateo arrives, and he will very soon, thanks to your loyal guard alerting him, you're going to watch him die. Understand?" Sophia's heart surged with a mixture of hope and dread. Luca must have regained consciousness and called Mateo. Hope and dread warred within her. Ricardo misread her flicker of relief as defiance. He shook her head violently by the hair, his eyes burning into hers. "You think he'll save you? He's walking right into a trap. One false move and my man there will put a bullet in your skull." He pointed the gun towards his henchman, who was now lurking off to the side with a rifle trained directly on Sophia. Sophia tried to steady her breathing, forcing herself to remain calm. She had to think, to find a way out of this impossible situation. The odds were stacked against her. A gun pointed at her head, another waiting for Mateo when he arrived. But Mateo had Luca and perhaps others with him. She subtly tested her bonds, her fingers working frantically at the zip ties. The zip tie on her left wrist was already slick with her blood from her earlier struggle at home. It cut into her skin, but she pressed on, beginning to twist her small hand, wincing as the plastic rubbed against her raw flesh. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Ricardo grew increasingly impatient, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Sophia's ears strained for any sound of approach, any indication that Mateo was near. Finally, there it was, a faint scuff of footsteps outside. Ricardo grinned wolfishly and retreated behind a stack of crates about 15 feet away, taking cover but keeping his gun trained on Sophia. He gestured for his thug to do the same on the opposite flank. "Showtime," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The warehouse door creaked open, casting a sliver of light into the darkness. Sophia's heart leapt with a surge of hope as she saw Mateo slip inside, flanked by Luca and another of his men. They moved cautiously, guns raised, sweeping the room, their eyes scanning every corner for any sign of danger. Sophia desperately wanted to cry out a warning, but Ricardo stepped out from behind his hiding place and pressed his pistol to her head from behind, effectively silencing her. Ah! He called out, his voice ringing through the warehouse. "Drop them, gentlemen, or the girl dies now." Mateo's eyes locked onto Sophia and went wide with terror and relief, his gaze taking in her bruised face and the sight of her bound to the chair. A murderous rage contorted his features, but with a gun pressed to her temple, he had no choice. He motioned for Luca and the other man to lower their weapons. Slowly, deliberately, Mateo bent down and laid his handgun on the ground, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Ricardo," he said, his voice raw with hatred, "this is between you and me. Let her go." Ricardo emerged fully now, keeping Sophia as a human shield in front of him as he moved closer, his eyes fixed on Mateo. Indeed, it is between us, he purred, his voice dripping with false sympathy. But I've learned your weakness, Duca. You care for this girl so much that you walked right into my hands. Matteo took a step forward, desperation evident in every line of his body. You have me. Do what you want with me, but leave her out of it. Sophia's throat tightened with emotion. No, Matteo. Don't, she cried, her voice filled with anguish. But Ricardo yanked her hair, silencing her with a sharp yelp of pain. Quiet, Ricardo hissed, his eyes gleaming as he savored the moment. Such chivalry. Toss over any other weapons, all of you, now. Luca and the other guard carefully slid a knife and a secondary pistol across the floor towards the henchman. The henchman collected everything, covering them with his rifle. Good, Ricardo said, his voice laced with satisfaction. He pushed Sophia's chair forward a few feet so she was positioned directly between him and Matteo, a human barrier. On your knees, old friend. Matteo complied without hesitation, kneeling just a couple of yards in front of Sophia. She could see his face clearly now, and the sight of it broke her heart. There were tears in his eyes as he looked at her, his expression filled with anguish and regret. I'm sorry, he choked out, his voice trembling with emotion. Sophia, I'm so sorry I dragged you into this. Her heart shattered at the anguish in his words, the weight of his guilt crushing her. It's not your fault, she managed to say around the lump in her throat, her voice thick with tears. I love you, Matteo. Emotion flickered across his face, a brief glimpse of hope and love amidst the despair. I love you, too, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Oh, spare me. Ricardo cut in, his voice disgusted. This isn't a damned romance. He stepped to Sophia's side, his gun aimed at Matteo's forehead now, his finger twitching on the trigger. It's a tragedy. Say goodbye. Sophia's pulse thundered in her ears, each beat a deafening drumbeat of fear. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as Ricardo's finger tightened on the trigger, the moment stretching into an eternity. No, 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 she whispered, refusing to let this happen. Summoning every ounce of will she possessed, Sophia yanked her left hand hard against the zip tie. The zip tie, slick with her blood, stretched just enough, and her hand slipped free. In one swift motion, she threw herself sideways out of the chair, knocking into Ricardo's arm just as he fired. The gunshot cracked like thunder, the sound echoing through the warehouse. The bullet grazed past Matteo's shoulder, missing its mark by inches. Chaos erupted. Luca lunged from his knees, tackling the rifleman before he could react. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, the weapon clattering away into the darkness. Matteo didn't hesitate. He surged to his feet and dove at Ricardo, tackling him to the ground. The two men tumbled to the concrete, grappling for control. Ricardo's pistol skidded across the floor, landing out of reach. Sophia, dazed and disoriented on the ground, saw Ricardo scramble for the gun. Matteo! She screamed, warning him of the impending danger. Matteo grabbed Ricardo's ankle, yanking him back with all his might. The crime boss roared in anger, swinging a wild kick that caught Matteo on the jaw. Matteo grunted in pain but clung on, dragging Ricardo down. They grappled furiously, trading blows, each man fighting with a desperate intensity. Nearby, Luca subdued the other henchman with a swift blow to the head, rendering him unconscious. Go help the boss, he shouted to the second guard, who had recovered a fallen gun. Sophia frantically tore at the remaining zip ties on her ankles, her freed hand slick with blood, making it easier to break free. She ignored the burning pain in her wrist and the searing graze of something on her upper arm. Had a bullet grazed her? She barely registered it, her focus solely on freeing herself and helping Matteo. She crawled towards the dropped pistol a few yards away, her heart pounding in her chest. Matteo and Ricardo were both on their feet again, locked in a fierce struggle. Ricardo had managed to draw a knife from his boot and slashed at Matteo's side. Matteo hissed in pain as the blade cut into him. In retaliation, Matteo landed a heavy punch to Ricardo's face, sending him reeling backward. Blood ran from Ricardo's nose, but he charged like a mad bull, knocking Mateo into a stack of wooden pallets. The structure collapsed with a thunderous crash, pinning Mateo's leg beneath the heavy weight. Ricardo raised his knife, his eyes blazing with triumph. "Time to die, Duca," he snarled, his voice filled with hatred. Sofia's fingers closed on the cool handle of Ricardo's fallen pistol. Shaking uncontrollably, she raised the weapon, her hands trembling. The two men struggled mere yards away, their movements blurring in her vision. She had to be sure not to hit Mateo, her aim had to be perfect. She waited, her heart in her throat, every nerve on high alert. There, Ricardo drew back his arm for a fatal stab, exposing his side for a split second. Sofia pulled the trigger. The recoil jolted her arm, the force of the shot sending a wave of pain through her body. A red bloom spread rapidly on Ricardo's coat as the bullet struck his upper arm. He howled in agony, the knife clattering from his grasp as his arm fell uselessly to his side. The crime boss stumbled backward, shock and disbelief etched across his face. Mateo threw off the broken pallet, freeing his leg, and in one fluid motion, snatched up the fallen knife. He pressed forward, slamming Ricardo against a pillar and holding the blade to his throat. Ricardo panted, blood from his nose and arms staining his expensive suit, his face contorted with pain and hatred. "Go on," he hissed at Mateo, his voice filled with defiance. "Finish it. Be the killer I know you are." Breathing hard, Mateo tightened his grip on the knife, his knuckles turning white. Rage contorted his face, the years of bad blood and loss fueling his desire to end Ricardo's life here and now. Sofia scrambled to her feet, her limbs trembling, and rushed to his side. "Mateo," she said softly, laying a gentle, bloody hand on his arm. "It's over. He's beaten. You're not a murderer. Not in cold blood." Mateo's jaw clenched, the blade at Ricardo's throat drawing a single drop of blood. Ricardo sneered, but a flicker of fear betrayed his bravado. "You have a choice," Sofia whispered, meeting Mateo's tortured gaze. "For us, for our future. Don't cross that line. He's not worth it." For a long moment, the world stood still, the air thick with tension. Then, Mateo closed his eyes, exhaling a shuddering breath. Slowly, he lowered the knife, his hand falling to his side, the blade clattering to the floor. Ricardo slumped against the pillar in defeat, glaring venomously at Mateo. Luca approached, his gun trained on the fallen man. "Boss, you all right?" Mateo nodded wearily, pulling Sofia into his arms as if to reassure himself that she was truly there. She melted against him, seeking comfort and safety in his embrace. "It ends here," Mateo said quietly, his voice firm. He glanced at Luca. "Call the police. Let them take out the trash." Ricardo swore and spat at the ground, his defiance waning. But pain and loss sapped his fight. He knew he was finished in more ways than one. Sofia buried her face in Mateo's chest, shaking with delayed fear and relief. His arms tightened around her, his grip protective. "Shukaramia, I've got you," he murmured, kissing the top of her head. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance as Luca made the necessary calls, summoning the authorities. Mateo gently lifted Sofia's chin, his eyes searching her face worriedly. "You're hurt," he said, his thumb grazing the raw rope burn and the cut on her arm. "I'm fine," she promised in a hoarse whisper, her voice raspy from screaming. "Thanks to you." He gave a broken laugh, emotion shining in his eyes. "It was you. You saved me first." Sofia managed a weak smile through her tears, her heart filled with love and gratitude. "Seems we make a good team." Mateo's expression turned tender, cupping her cheeks, filthy and bruised as she was. He kissed her deeply, reverently, his lips lingering on hers. Sofia threw her unbound arm around him, kissing him back with all the love and longing that had nearly been snatched away from them. Behind them, Luca cleared his throat, guiding the arriving police officers towards a cursing Ricardo and the unconscious thug. But Matteo and Sophia were lost in each other, oblivious to the chaos surrounding them. When they finally parted, Matteo rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her skin. In the flashing red and blue lights now filling the warehouse, he whispered, "Ti amo, Sophia." Tears of joy filled her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "Ti amo, Matteo," she replied, her voice filled with emotion. They had faced death and darkness together, and emerged into the light of each other's love, their bond stronger than ever. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, united by their love and their shared experience. 2 years later, a warm Mediterranean breeze rustled gently through the olive trees as the late afternoon sun bathed the rolling Sicilian countryside in a golden light. On the terrace of a cozy stone villa, overlooking the verdant hills and the distant sparkling sea, Sophia swayed gently with a drowsy infant cradled in her arms, humming a soft Italian lullaby. Inside the open French doors, familiar voices drifted from the kitchen, creating a comforting domestic scene. Her mother and Nana were cheerfully debating a recipe, their voices laced with affection, and Matteo's deep laughter chimed in, adding to the warmth of the atmosphere. The sound brought a contented smile to Sophia's face. Family. La famiglia è tutto. Family is everything. She looked down at baby Antonio, who had finally fallen asleep against her shoulder, his tiny body relaxed and peaceful. He had Matteo's dark lashes and her own cute button nose. Gently, she brushed a stray curl from his cherubic face and placed a tender kiss on his forehead, her heart overflowing with love. Life had transformed so much in the past 2 years, it was almost unbelievable. Sometimes Sophia could hardly believe the path that had led her here, starting with an ordinary night at a restaurant that turned into anything but ordinary. She and Matteo had walked through danger and darkness, navigating treacherous terrain, to build this shining, new life together, a testament to their love and resilience. After Ricardo's arrest and conviction, aided by evidence anonymously provided to the authorities, Matteo had made good on his promise to change course, to leave his old life behind. He quietly dismantled the most violent aspects of his operations and transitioned many of his businesses into legitimate enterprises. In time, the name Duca became associated with charitable donations and community projects, a symbol of generosity and positive change, instead of fear and intimidation. Not long after, he proposed to Sophia on a secluded sunset beach in Sicily, his eyes filled with tears of joy as he vowed to love and protect her for the rest of his life, a promise she knew he would keep. She didn't hesitate to say yes, her heart overflowing with happiness. They were married in a small, picturesque church overlooking the sea, with her mother and Nana standing proudly beside her, and Matteo's mother flying in all the way from Palermo to bless their union, a testament to the importance of family in their lives. Now they lived a peaceful, idyllic life in the Sicilian countryside, supported by Matteo's successful and legitimate businesses. Sophia, fulfilling a lifelong dream, had opened her own bakery cafe in the nearby town, a passion she never even realized she had until Matteo helped her believe it was possible, encouraging her to pursue her dreams. Each morning they worked side by side, kneading dough and brewing cappuccinos for the locals, who would quickly embrace the friendly young couple from abroad, charmed by their warmth and genuine kindness. Her grandmother and mother had moved to Sicily as well, delighted to trade the noisy, bustling city for a sunny, peaceful village where Carla's health improved dramatically, and Maria found joy helping with the cafe and doting on her beloved grandson, filling the role of Nana with boundless love. Sophia heard the screen door creak open and turned to see Matteo stepping out onto the terrace, his presence radiating warmth and affection. Dressed casually in rolled-up shirt sleeves and loafers, he looked every bit the devoted husband and father, though the glint of strength and determination in his hazel eyes was unchanged, a reminder of the man he once was. He came up behind Sophia and wrapped a loving arm around her waist, peering down at their sleeping son, his eyes filled with adoration. "Everything all right, amore?" he murmured, his voice soft and tender. "Perfect," Sophia whispered, leaning back against him, savoring his embrace. "Just got him to sleep." Matteo smiled, pressing a gentle kiss to Sophia's temple, his touch sending a shiver of delight down her spine. I was thinking after dinner we can walk down to the grove. The sunflowers are in full bloom. Sophia tilted her head up to meet his gaze, her heart fluttering as it always did whenever he looked at her with such love and affection. I'd love that, she replied, her voice filled with warmth. Golden evening light played across Mateo's face, highlighting the faint scar at his temple, the only outward reminder of that fateful night, a silent testament to the danger they had faced and overcome. Noticing her looking, he raised his brows in question, his expression questioning. I was just thinking how lucky I am, Sophia said softly, her voice filled with emotion. If I hadn't spoken Italian that night, if you hadn't heard me. Mateo's eyes warmed, his gaze softening with tenderness. I think fate would have brought us together one way or another, he said, his voice filled with conviction. But hearing you speak my mother tongue, yes, that was the spark that ignited everything. He chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. I did rather dramatically demand they bring you to me, did I not? Sophia laughed quietly to avoid waking the baby, her heart filled with joy. You did. It was quite the first impression. And look at us now, Mateo said, his voice filled with wonder. Mateo gently traced a finger along Antonio's tiny back, his touch featherlight, a tender pride evident in his expression. He then cupped Sophia's cheek, his wedding band glinting in the setting sun. Grazie, cara, for everything. You showed me what life could be beyond all the shadows. Emotions swelled in Sophia's chest, overwhelming her with love and gratitude. She remembered the guarded, hardened man she had first met, the powerful Mafia boss, and compared him to the loving, devoted partner by her side. Both parts of him were dear to her, intertwined and essential to who he was. She covered his hand with hers, her touch conveying her love and support. We found that new life together, she said, her voice filled with emotion. Inside, Nana's voice called out, Sophia, Mateo, dinner is ready. They shared a knowing smile, a silent understanding passing between them. Mateo carefully took baby Antonio from her arms, cradling him gently against his chest. The little one stirred and opened sleepy eyes, then gave a tiny sigh and snuggled contentedly into his father's shoulder, finding comfort in his familiar scent and touch. Sophia's heart melted at the sight, her chest filled with an overwhelming sense of love and happiness. Hand in hand, they went inside to join their family, their steps light and carefree. The house was filled with the enticing aroma of ripe tomatoes, fresh bread, and the bright, cheerful sound of laughter, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. In this simple, beautiful moment, Sophia knew she was exactly where she was meant to be, safe in the warmth of love and family, with the man who had changed her life forever when he heard her speak Italian on an otherwise ordinary night. And for Mateo, every day that began and ended with Sophia by his side was a precious gift, a living proof that even a man with a dark past could find redemption and tenderness in the heart of the woman he loved, a woman who had shown him the way to the light. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, their bond unbreakable, their love a guiding force. Their journey, full of danger, passion, and unwavering hope, had led them here, to a happiness hard-won and deeply cherished, a happiness they would protect and nurture with all their hearts. Mateo had told her one quiet evening, as they sat watching the sunset, their hands intertwined, "Life is sweeter with you." Sophia smiled as they sat down to dinner, her fingers intertwined with Mateo's beneath the table, their connection a silent promise. "Grazie, amor mio," she whispered, meeting his loving gaze. "Thank you, my love." Life was indeed sweeter together, a testament to their love and commitment.